Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we react to 5 cases that were solved decades later by the channel Explore With Us. Let's go. Let's just get right into it. Make sure to watch the original video, link in the description, or have it on the background so they get to view. Let's go. Subscribe to Explore With Us. Let's go. Five cold cases solved in 2020. Okay, so it was just in 2020.
What
Probably
is
some
up,
interest.
Ewu crew?
You think there was? I think I've seen some real crime cases, and I realized that a bunch of cold cases have been solved like near 2020, 2021 though. So even though it's just 1 year, I think there's gonna be a lot of cool cases. Just because I don't know, man. It's just maybe in quarantine, just a lot of investigators just got bored and was able to just find all these cases, had a lot more time on their hands or something.
What is up, Ewu crew? Today we are going to be covering 5 horrifying cold cases that differ tremendously, yet they all have one vital thing in common. They were all officially solved in 2020. Let's
Go,
get
man.
into it. The first cold case we have in store for you today is that of Colorado Springs' Jennifer Watkins. In late October of 1999, 23-year-old Jennifer Watkins was elated to take up a new position as a dietary aide at Memorial Hospital in Colorado
They always show these photos. It's always like a fucking yearbook photo or some shit
Springs.
every time, and it's always just whenever you see a thing and they're talking about someone and they show like a yearbook photo of them, it's not a good sign. You already know it's a true crime case when they show the yearbook photo or something,
At the time,
or like a driver's license photo or some shit.
Jennifer and her husband, Michael, had been wrapped up in taking care of their young children while still trying to make ends meet financially. So when Jennifer was offered a new position at Memorial Hospital, she was relieved, as it meant that everything in her life appeared to be lining up nicely. But, as per most things in life, some things are just too good to be true. Only 2 weeks after being hired as a dietary aide, something peculiar happened. On the evening of November 6, 1999, Jennifer's husband received a call from their children's school claiming that Jennifer had never stopped by to pick up their kids after
Oh,
classes
God.
let out. A chill went down Michael's spine as he realized immediately that something had to be terribly wrong. Jennifer was known by her friends and family alike for her punctuality, and she would never have left their kids. Jennifer's husband quickly collected his children from the school before returning home, hoping to find Jennifer waiting for him. Unfortunately, Jennifer was nowhere to be found. Later that evening, Michael contacted Colorado Springs Police Department to report his wife was missing. Something inside of Michael told him that Jennifer would never just abandon her children, and that
Okay.
something had.
This is in 2020, so I don't think his voice is AI. But these true crime channels, why do they always have these fucking voices, dude? They always have like a voice, like they were born to fucking make these true crime videos.
Had to have happened to her. Authorities understood the concerns of Jennifer's family. However, they weren't as alarmed as Michael, and were tempted to classify Jennifer's disappearance as a runaway. That is, until authorities were notified that a body was found under a stairwell in an area of the hospital that had long been under construction.
How do you murder someone in a hospital? That's crazy.
Detectives had actually been conducting interviews at Memorial Hospital regarding Jennifer's sudden disappearance when the news broke of a discovery of a woman's body that had been half-heartedly hidden just out of sight. 2 local elevator service employees had accidentally come across a rather foul and distinctive smell while inspecting an elevator shaft that needed repairing. The smell had led to a body carefully wrapped in plastic and bound with duct tape.
See, how do you hide that just in a hospital? Like, isn't there a hell of people around? Like, how do you just casually carry around a bag that clearly has a body in it with duct tape that smells so bad, like, and murder someone, I presume, in the hospital? Like, why? Because why would you murder them outside and then take them in the hospital? Like, how the hell do you do all that in the hospital? It doesn't make any sense.
Shortly after the body was reported, investigators from the CSPD Homicide Unit, Metro Crime Lab, and the El Paso County Coroner's Office were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, investigators approached the body that would later be identified as Jennifer Watkins. Jennifer's clothes had been strewn about the stairwell, indicating that some kind of struggle had taken place. After further investigation into what had actually happened to Jennifer, the El Paso County Coroner's Office claimed that she had been assaulted and her cause of death had been a result of, quote, blunt force trauma to the head.
Dang, someone just came right behind her, whack her in the fucking head, just like instantly killed her. Then, well, no, there was a struggle, so I don't even know how you could do this without like someone hearing
Jennifer's
this shit.
death was then ruled a homicide after investigators found hairs, fibers, and semen residue on the plastic that had been used to bind Jennifer's body before its
Yikes.
discovery. For Watkins' case managed to develop 2 DNA profiles from the evidence found at the scene of the crime. Soon, investigators were conducting a variety of interviews that involved biological samples being taken from suspects to compare to the DNA profile. Yet, no matter how many potential suspects were looked into, it seemed as though Jennifer's killer managed to slip through the cracks. And then, her case went cold. Over the past 21 years, all potential leads into Jennifer's murder appeared to result in nothing but dead ends. That is, until new evidence arose in August of 2020 that helped to bring some answers to Jennifer's case. As the DNA profile produced from the evidence left behind at Jennifer's crime scene had been entered into databases across the country, investigators hoped that it would one day help to identify Jennifer's killer. And
It seems like that would identify him from any DNA evidence because, like, it's so for a crime this serious, it definitely seems like it. Because, like, if like, how would you commit a crime that serious and then never even do like a small crime again to get your DNA in the system? Like, it really doesn't. Like, it seems like if you're gonna commit a crime that serious, it seems like at some point that wouldn't be your only crime you ever commit. Like, at some point, you're someone would do that would do another crime at some point, you know. To get even a more minor one to get your DNA in the system at all.
that is exactly what happened when the CSPD was notified of a potential DNA lead.
Crazy it took that long though.
The person of interest was a man by the name of Ricky Severt. The twist: Ricky had actually been interviewed by detectives all the way back in November of 1999 as a part of the initial homicide investigation. Ricky had been working as an employee at Memorial Hospital as a part of the maintenance department. And in November of 2001, he died.
Oh
Ricky
shit.
Severt had been killed in a traffic accident just east of Colorado
How'd-
Springs.
How'd they find him though? Like 20 years later though, if he died in 2001.
19 years after his death, familial DNA from his relatives was collected
Oh, wow.
and used to determine that Ricky had been the person responsible for the murder of Jennifer Watkins.
They went through his
However,
relatives. That's crazy.
Because Severt died, Jennifer's family may never have some of the conclusive answers they desperately want. By December of 2020, the district attorney's office officially closed out the investigation into the murder of Jennifer Watkins as, quote, exceptionally cleared, death of offender. The next case we have in store for you today is one that is arguably more chilling than the first.
Oh god.
It is the case of Baby April.
Oh
Perhaps
no,
the
not
most
baby.
eerie and disturbing part of Baby April's case is the notion that her background is almost entirely unknown. In fact, the name Baby April was simply what investigators dubbed a small, full-term baby girl who had been found dead in Moline, Illinois. On April 11th, 1992, an unsuspecting man was walking his dog along the bank of the Mississippi River, just off of 17th Street in Moline, when he noticed something extremely unsettling. Just ahead of him, something was floating in the river, a black plastic garbage bag with a disturbingly familiar outline inside. After having called 911 and reporting the strange object, the reality of the scene became strikingly clear. The officers dispatched to the bank of the Mississippi River carefully opened the plastic bag to reveal the body of a deceased baby girl. As an investigation
Why
began,
would you kill?
the
What?
coroner
What motivation did you have to kill a baby? Like, I understand if you're kill, like I understand like if you what, like if you don't want to be if it's like the parents who did it and you didn't want to be a parent and that's why you did it, then why didn't you do that before it was born? Like, why you have to like have a baby be born and then kill it? That doesn't make any sense. Like, what, you just change your mind or something? And if you're not part of the family, what motivations are there for killing a baby? It's a fucking baby. What the fuck did it do to you?
from Rock Island County
Doesn't make any sense.
identified the infant's cause of death to be suffocation, asphyxiation, and hypothermia. While authorities attempted to contextualize the gruesome and disturbing murder case that they found themselves investigating, they chose to refer to the infant as Baby April to correspond with the month she was found, as they had no other way to identify her. In the initial stages of Baby April's investigation, there were essentially no leads for officers to work off of. There were very little clues or information to even create a suspect profile for the baby's killer. Though there had been an unknown woman's DNA found at the scene of the crime, investigators were entirely unable to match the DNA to anyone in any database they had access to. In fact, no leads or arrests were made.
When again, in databases like this, like if you're gonna kill a baby and put it in a bag and throw it in the river, like there's no way you don't commit any other minor crime after that. Like, it's too severe of a crime for that to be the only one you've ever done. You know, it just seems like if you're that type of person, you're also the type of person to eventually do something else. You
At
know?
all in 1992 regarding Baby April's murder. Despite the lack of insight in the case, one thing was for certain. The answers investigators so desperately needed could be provided by Baby April's family, as they were the most likely suspects. The only problem was
Had
that
to be if no one
one knew
reported it.
where Baby April had come from.
It had to be the family, because if it wasn't the family, then someone would have reported, "Hey, my baby's dead. Where the fuck's my baby?" You know. But if no one reported that, and then it was obviously had to be the family.
Nor did they know who had abandoned her in such a gruesome way. So, Baby April's shocking and upsetting case quickly went ice cold. For 22 years after Baby April's body was initially discovered, every bit of insight into the case eventually dried up. That is, until an advance in genetic genealogy testing led to a massive break in the case. In 2014, a woman by the name of Cece Moore had been working in phenotype testing that offered help to curate easily identifiable family trees for those who were curious about their family's lineage. Eventually, her work evolved to specifically help adoptees and other people of unknown parentage find their long-lost family members. Throughout the time that Moore had been involved in such work, her team also decided to apply their tool to assist law enforcement in cases such as Baby April's. In doing so, investigators had actually been able to locate a variety of different DNA.
Yeah, a lot of these also the reason why these cases get solved so much later is just because when they originally happen, DNA technology is just a lot more behind. And then no one really looks at it for a while, that in depth, and then someone looks at it again with the new DNA technology in depth for the first time again, it gets solved. So that's a large reason why also these things take so long to do, just because the technology when it originally happened, when it was mainly people were looking at it, wasn't really there.
Matches similar to Baby April's, and were even able to narrow down the sample taken from Baby April's crime scene that perfectly matched with one immediate family. Officers were then able to track down a woman by the name of Angela Renee Sibke, who was a resident in Orion, Illinois at the same time that Baby April's body had been discovered. By December of 2014, Angela Renee Sibke was officially identified as the mother of Baby April. and was promptly issued an arrest warrant for the murder of the infant in 1992. Sipke is being held on a $1 million bond, an unusually high bond for a cold case, but likely due to the horrific nature of the crime. The third case we have is that of 19-year-old Deborah Tomlinson from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Deborah
Thank you for the-
Tomlinson
I
was a
didn't know where
Grand
Colorado
Junction,
Springs was.
Colorado local who had a love for her friends, family, and her horses. At 19, Deborah enrolled in college as she loved being a student and was noted to be outgoing and had big plans for her future. As a 19-year-old college student, Deborah managed to afford her own apartment near her Mesa College's campus. Living on her own, she was able to truly
Pre-inflation era.
feel like the adult woman she was gradually becoming. Not to mention, the privacy of starting her own life was exactly what Deborah had always wanted. Unfortunately, living alone wasn't always as safe as Deborah may have hoped. In fact, if Deborah hadn't been alone during the week of Christmas in 1975, perhaps
The 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s is the steroid era for serial killers. Like, if you look at the serial killer stats, like number of serial killers in the United States, 60s, 70s, 80s is the most insane era of all time. Like, there were so fucking many. It's insane. Like, literally name, like, the most famous serial killers of all time. Like, I'm sure, like, 15 at least of the top 20 are all from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like, it's like an insane era. It was like a perfect combination of, you know, like, lower technology to find people, you know, lower security camera footage, you know, and also just high, you know, yeah, I don't know what would cause it to be higher though in an era than eras previous. I don't know, maybe just a high level of mental instability around that time. I don't know, a lot of more drugs going around or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's insane, dude.
someone would have been able to prevent the horrible tragedy that would occur. Or, at the least, someone would have been there as a witness to know the absolute truth of what happened. All that is certain about the fateful week is this. Grand Junction police officers received a call from a local landlord claiming that she had discovered something horrible about one of her tenants. When officers pressed her a bit farther, the landlord said that she had known the tenant, Deborah Tomlinson, a bit better than she knew most of her other tenants, because Deborah was young and independent, and she wanted to keep an eye on her. The landlord had noticed that she had not seen much of Deborah in a few days, which was unusual. In fact, she hadn't seen Deborah at all, despite one of the windows in her apartment being left ajar for days. At first, the landlord assumed
You
that
smell anything
Deborah
funny?
had gone to see her parents for the holiday and simply forgot to lock up properly. Wanting to avoid any possible damage to both the apartment and Deborah's belongings, the landlord decided to let herself into the unit to close up the window until Deborah's eventual return. What she stumbled upon in that apartment was something that would haunt her memories for long after.
Like, yeah, this is a
Partially
nightmare.
clothed,
Yeah, this is a nightmare scenario to checking up on someone and just finding a horrific crime scene. Like, yeah, that's actually a nightmare scenario right
in
there.
a shallow porcelain bathtub,
You always hear about it, but it's a
clearly
nightmare scenario.
deceased, was none other than 19-year-old Deborah Tomlinson. After the landlord's call, the police promptly arrived. Officers on the scene noticed that Deborah had been both bound before her death and strangled. It was also evident that Deborah had been the victim of assault. Officers noticed a deep wound on Deborah's forehead that led them to believe she had tried her best to put up a fight against her mystery attacker. Unfortunately for Deborah, it wasn't enough. Aside from the brutal state that her body was discovered in, Deborah's apartment appeared to be completely intact, exactly the way the landlord had remembered it. It was clear to investigators from the beginning that someone had managed to let themselves into Deborah's apartment and slip out as invisible as a ghost. There was also no clear indication of one
yeah.
distinct murder weapon in Deborah's case, making it difficult.
This one you can limit down a lot to either it's a serial killer just killing a bunch of people, or someone who has specifically had a grudge against her. Because there was no like, the apartment was perfectly fine. It's not a robbery. Like there had to be no other like intent other than just get into the apartment and kill her.
To work toward catching a killer who had managed to vanish into thin air. In fact, investigators had no major leads in Deborah's case at all. Many resources in the Grand Junction Police Department were allocated toward finding Deborah's killer.
Check for any creepy neighbors who might have been, a creep.
Though they seemed to be in vain for the most part. There had been very little evidence left behind at the crime scene, and it appeared as though no one had seen anyone in the apartment complex that could have been Deborah's mysterious killer. Just like that, her case went completely cold a year after she died. Unlike the cases of Jennifer Watkins and baby April, Deborah Tomlinson's murder went unsolved for 45 long years. Those who are familiar with the nature of murder investigations know that cold cases of such durations are often never solved, leaving the families of the victims to forever wonder what had happened. Fortunately,
that's actually
with the
so
steady
long. That's
progression
insane.
of DNA technology, many cases that are nearly a half-century old are beginning to see the light of day once more, as was the case of Deborah Tomlinson.
Shout out DNA technology,
in 2020,
man. I'm telling you, this is why so many of them had to be found in 2020. Lockdown, just a bunch of these investigators with this new DNA technology were just like, well, I got nothing else to do. Let's go back and use this new technology on a fuck ton of old cases, see if we can get them. And that's why there were so many were found.
Police in Grand Junction decided to reopen the endlessly puzzling case that shook the whole town to its core. And something seemingly impossible happened. Working with a DNA company in Virginia, investigators were able to create a genetic data profile from the limited DNA evidence that had been left behind at the scene of Deborah's death. After running the DNA profile through a public genetic genealogy database, investigators were able to narrow down a possible list of people whose genetic makeup was similar to the person responsible for Deborah's death. From there, police were able to positively identify a man who would have been in Grand Junction at the time of Deborah Tomlinson's murder 45 years beforehand. The suspect police identified was a man by the name of Jimmy Dean Duncan. According to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the DNA left behind at Deborah's apartment was a perfect match to the man who had been 26 years old at the time of the murder. Yet, during the initial investigation in 1975,
there any motive? Did they know if he knew her or not, or if he was a serial killer or something? Like, we just don't know a motive at all
Duncan
or anything?
hadn't even been a suspect. Unfortunately, Duncan died in 1987 from unknown causes, having never faced appropriate consequences for his actions on that fateful day in 1975.
Well, he would have been like 70.
Police are now trying to find
by
a
the time they
motive
figured
for
it out.
Deborah's death, but
Yeah.
they did say that Duncan had a criminal record from a robbery and from a shooting in Florida. Deborah's father commented on the release of his daughter's killer's name.
It's weird. If he didn't even know her, and he didn't have that's not like that severe of a criminal history. It's like, I don't know, maybe he's had like a fucking mental breakdown or something. I don't know.
Saying, "It took a lot of weight off my mind. Still don't know why, but at least I know who." After so many decades of mystery, Deborah's murder case has finally been closed. The fourth case we are taking a look at today is that of 5-year-old Siobhan McGinnis.
God damn it. Same with the fucking baby. What motive do you have to kill a 5-year-old? Like what? There's no. There's not even no. It doesn't like. It's like an extra step. Like there's not even like a insane motive you can have. It's like a different level of insane that have any reason to ever kill a 5-year-old. Like it's what the fuck.
Siobhan McGinnis was born and raised in Missoula, Montana, with her loving
What
parents.
the actual fuck, dude?
Since her birth, Siobhan was the absolute apple of her parents' eye, and as their darling daughter, they would have done anything to make her happy. As a toddler, Siobhan often attended play dates with her various friends who lived on the same street as the McGinnis family. In fact, she would frequently spend time with one particular family friend on her block, whose house was just a few doors down from her parents' home. The houses were so close together that 5-year-old Siobhan would simply walk herself to and from her friend's house. Siobhan almost never had any issues during her quick walk home. Almost. In the chill of a mid-February afternoon in 1970,
Always gotta have a bigger sibling coming along with you, man. Come on now. Oh my god, yeah. This is 70s. This is like... Was this Missing Kids on Milk Carton era, or was this right before that? I don't know. This might have been during that era. And if it was during that era, then how do you not know? Like, come on now. This is the... Do you not see all these kids on the milk cartons? How do you not know that this is... You can't be having your kids walking out just out in the open, man. What are you doing? Yeah. Once again, this is prime serial killer era, though. This is the steroid era for serial killers. I'm telling you, 90% of the true crime cases you will cover will be between either 1960 or in the 60s to the 80s, or it will be in very modern times because there's more information on it due to the internet. So you'll know a lot more about it. That's why. So it'll be interesting that way. Yeah.
74. Siobhan had set off for home from her friend's house in the same way she always had.
Literally, you can go, like I'm telling you, go to any true crime video, 90% of the cases, 60s through 80s, or like very recently, internet era. Like there's never anything else.
With her jacket zipped up properly and her hands tucked into her favorite pair of gloves, Siobhan did her best not to linger in the frigid air too long. Though her home was in her sights for the entire duration of the walk, something peculiar happened that day. Siobhan never made it home. When Siobhan didn't arrive home at the designated hour, her parents felt a sinking feeling in the pit of their stomachs. Something had gone terribly wrong.
Absolutely horrifying.
The McGinnises quickly worked their way up and down the various streets in their neighborhood, hoping that Siobhan had simply wandered off or gotten distracted on her way home. When they couldn't locate Siobhan, the McGinnises called 911 and explained that their beautiful 5-year-old daughter was missing. The police officers who were dispatched to Siobhan's neighborhood found almost no trace of the little girl, despite their search efforts. In fact, it seemed as though she had completely disappeared. The search for the young girl lasted for days before officers made any progress in her disappearance. But it wasn't the progress anyone was hoping for. 2 days after her initial abduction,
yeah, it's very rare that after a few days of being missing, after like a week or so of being missing, it's very unlikely that you find them alive at all. It's just very unlikely. That's why the missing kids on the milk carton thing never really worked out.
Vaughn's body was found in a snow-covered drain culvert just off of the I-90 freeway at the Tura exit. The McGinnis family was faced with the harsh reality of their daughter's disappearance. The fact that she was not only kidnapped, but she had also been brutally murdered. Siobhan had suffered trauma and a type of assault that we cannot dive into here on YouTube, and she sustained various stab wounds to her chest. Siobhan's discovery sent the town of Missoula into a state of shock, as the community was not used to dealing with crimes of such degrees of violence. The detectives assigned to Siobhan's case worked tirelessly to search for any leads to capture the person responsible for such a heinous act. Yet they always found themselves reaching more and more dead ends. There were 2 key witnesses who thought they may have seen something suspicious, and each gave a vague description of someone and a vehicle fleeing the scene. Yet investigators found virtually no suspects in Siobhan's case, leaving little room for a proper investigation. As quickly as she had gone missing, Siobhan's case went cold. In fact, Siobhan's case did not just go cold, it stayed that way for decades. For 46
I think the way this video is going, by the way, I'm pretty sure they're ordered by how old they are, how long they went cold for before being sold, which is a pretty cool way to rank these. That came off as bad. A pretty good way to list them in the order this way, to see just how long these things can go cold before being solved. Because it's pretty insane how long, like something that unsolved for 40 years gets solved. I mean, that's crazy.
Painfully long years, Siobhan's family was forced to live with the knowledge that their darling daughter had been brutally murdered, and justice was far from being served. Then, in October of 2020, the Missoula County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Squad officially announced that they had managed to uncover the truth behind Siobhan's death. Announced that they had managed to uncover the truth behind Siobhan's death. Evidence that had originally been collected from the crime scene in 1974 had been paired with current advances in DNA technology to positively identify the man behind the murder of Siobhan McGinnis. Richard William Davis was named as the individual responsible. Davis had been 32 when he abducted, mistreated, and subsequently murdered 5-year-old Siobhan in the mid-1970s. Authorities working on Siobhan's long-term investigation noted that they were not sure why Davis had even been in Missoula at the time, and he seemed to have been passing through the area. Multiple witnesses were
Just casually passing through, just commit a heinous crime. It was probably a good way to get away with it. Because it's like, oh, I'm just passing by. I don't even live here. Why'd I do this,
able to attest to seeing Davis's car around the town
That's probably why they didn't find his car, because they were just looking at cars around the area.
during the time of Siobhan's kidnapping. And his DNA was a perfect match for the DNA collected from the crime scene the day Siobhan was found. Though the case was eventually solved, Richard Davis avoided ever facing any consequences for his crime, as he died in 2012 at the age of 70.
Pretty sure the baby killer is the only one that didn't die before the case was solved.
Investigators believe that Davis wasn't connected to any other crimes during his life, and his obituary, written by...
That's so weird. Like, why would you just passing through commit a heinous crime like that, and then never commit any other crime? Like, that's such a heinous crime. It seems like something if you're willing to do that, how would you not commit any other crimes? Like, it seems like that he just is actually the culprit for a lot more crimes that they just haven't solved yet. They haven't looked at yet. And he has to be. Like, there's no way that's the only crime you ever commit.
His family describes him as a born-again Christian. Perhaps the
Right.
only notion of closure that the
Sure, buddy.
McGinnis family received from discovering the truth of their daughter's death is that Richard Davis is now incapable of hurting another family in the same way. Missoula is currently creating a permanent memorial to Siobhan in the form of a sculpture as a living remembrance to the little girl taken too soon. Finally, the last case we have for you today is
Here we
Orange
go,
County,
man.
California's oldest cold case. In
man.
1968, the body of an unknown woman
68.
wearing a floral print...
Dude, that's insane, dude. Like, 50 years later. Like, you could be born and die, and with this case being completely cold, and then it gets solved. Like, that's crazy, man. That's actually crazy.
blouse, purple pants, loaf...
Like, think about this. Kobe Bryant was born, grew up, filled this entire amazing NBA career, retired, did things post-retirement, had a whole family, and then died while this case was cold. And then before it got solved, and then it eventually gets solved. Like, that's insane. Just thinking of how long it was in between these two things happening.
and a costume ring with a large blue stone set in a silver band was found in a drainage ditch near Newland Street in Yorktown Avenue in Huntington Beach, California. 3 young boys accidentally discovered the troubling crime scene as they wandered closer to what they realized was, in fact, a human body. They quickly called the police, who were then dispatched to the scene of a crime that would come to haunt Orange County for decades. The woman's body had no form of identification at all. In fact, it appeared as though the woman had been thoroughly cleaned and left purposefully unidentifiable. But one thing
That's
was
kind
for
of
certain.
a
The
smart
woman
way
had not come to the drainage
to
ditch
protect
on her
yourself.
own accord. She had been beaten, assaulted, and her throat cut, yet very little evidence was actually collected from the scene, as almost none had been left behind. The unknown woman's killer had been very thorough, but there was always room for error. Near the body were the slightest remains of a cigarette butt that had been carelessly discarded. As it turned out, the DNA from the cigarette matched the DNA swabbed from the assault kit used to pick up traces left on the mystery woman. The woman was estimated to have been somewhere in her mid-20s at the time of her death. Despite multiple attempts at trying to find the family of the woman, investigators on her case constantly came up empty-handed. This woman, it had seemed, was unknown to everyone, and it didn't look as though anyone had even reported her missing. Just
That's
like
sad.
that, the search for her identity went virtually nowhere. Unfortunately, so did the search for her killer. That is, until over 5 decades later. Orange County Sheriff's Department reopened the Jane Doe's case and uncovered some of the long sought-after answers. Finally, after years of searching, Orange County investigators were able to find a DNA match from the profile produced from the samples collected off of the woman's body. And, of course, from the forgotten cigarette butt. Through
This is a double unsolved because you don't even know we have to figure out who the woman is and who the killer is.
the use of investigative genetics out the possible family tree of the murderer. More so than that, they were able to narrow down the killer to one man in particular, a man by the name of Johnny Crisco. Crisco's identity came to light in
You telling me it wasn't Phil Spector? It's around that time where he was producing.
2019, allowing for investigators to come one step closer
Randy Johnson looking motherfucker.
to fully understanding what had happened to the mystery woman all those years before. However, once more investigators found themselves at a loss for answers when they learned that Crisco had died of cancer in 2015, just 4 years before the world learned of his
Did they not figure out who the woman was?
heinous endeavors in Southern California. Crisco hadn't been a suspect at the time of the murder, but it is reported that he had been discharged from the Army after only 3 years when a psychological exam determined he had a pattern of being quick to anger, easy to feel unjustly treated, chronically resentful, immature, and impulsive.
That's actually a really dangerous trait that I think goes overlooked by a lot of people. Easy to feel unjustly treated. Like if someone is very easy where they feel like they feel like they're unjustly treated, a lot of times they act out in a lot of ways. I feel like that's a trait that a lot of people need to look at a lot more when seeing someone's gonna, have bad signs about them. Someone keeps going
Even
on about
though
how unjustly they're
authorities
treated.
were successful in finding out who had been responsible for Orange County's longest unsolved homicide, they were disappointed that the killer had narrowly evaded facing the consequences of his actions in life. More so than that, they knew that their investigation could not end until they were able to identify the victim. Having once again utilized the technology associated with investigative genetic genealogy, Huntington Beach police officers were able to finally name the woman who had been unknown for so long. Her name was Anita Louise
There we go.
Pateau, and she had been a long way from home
That's double solved case right there. 50 years later. That's crazy.
when she was found dead in Southern California. Anita Louise Pateau was originally from Maine, where her parents, 7 siblings, and extended family lived their entire lives. In early 1968, she had sent a letter to her family saying that she had found work as a waitress in California and was living with her friends 11 months before she died. In the letter, she said she would return home that year, but they never heard from her again.
That's crazy. They didn't
When
report for her
investigators
missing or
were
anything.
finally able to reach out to Anita's remaining family members in late 2020, it became clear that Anita's siblings never gave up looking for their long-lost sister. Lori Quirian, Anita's 60-year-old niece, said, It is a big weight lifted off. She's not missing anymore. She is close to us now. We have a sense of peace that comes with that. Cold cases are often chilling and frequently disheartening to those associated with the victims of such brutal crimes as the ones we have discussed today. However, it is not entirely impossible to uncover the truth in such instances.
Yeah, it gives some hope to like a lot of the coldest cases of all time. It's like these like 50 years was able to uncover.
Even decades later.
Alright, so that's the end of this video. Yeah, if you want me to watch more Explore with us, more true crime videos, make sure to, suggest those in the comments, like this one so I know you like it. Obviously, go watch the original Explore with us first if you haven't. Go subscribe to them. And we're trying to subscribe to this channel. We're trying to get 2,000 subs. So if you like me, then please do that. And, yeah, that'll be about it. Bye.